construction's broken. It is. You know, when you look at our mental health problems, when you look at the suicide rate, nobody wants to work in a work environment like that. People want to work in a place where they want to go to work. This is when I really realised that there was problems that women were quietly enduring and then leaving the industry. So we've got 42% of people leave in the first 5 years. And so then as I delved deeper, it wasn't just the women that were suffering on sites, it's also the men.
The question to ask, what needs to change?
Well, the National Site Standard is a workforce framework. We've never had this before in construction.
You've explained to me what the National Site Standard seeks to achieve, but what makes this so important for you? Welcome to the next episode of the Building Sites podcast. Today, I'm joined by Renee Preston, CEO of Galloway Construction and founder of the National Site Standard. Renee, thank you very much for joining me. I know you've had an incredibly busy day. We spent the morning at the Manchester launch or the Northern launch of the National Site Standard. So thanks for taking the time to come and see me here.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. For those who don't know who you are, and for clarity, we've only recently become acquainted. Start from the beginning, if you will. What got you to the position where you were launching a National Site Standard this morning and a sort of a précis version of that journey to date?
Yeah, some might say I've had to put my money where my mouth is. So I run Galloway Construction with my husband. So I came into construction. I always tell people I married into construction. And so I have a marketing background, and I came into Galloway to work at the front end of the business to support the growth and sort of meet new clients, find new tenders, so pre-con side of construction. And then over time that grows, and sort of, you know, you want to understand more about, you know, a JCT contract versus a D&B, and, you know, it's just a natural progression within the industry. And so over that time, when I was getting more involved with the company and more after spade in the ground, I just really noticed the culture. I noticed a pushback from people not really wanting me there, assuming that I wasn't one of the directors. I wasn't the person that actually won that contract, and that's the reason they're on that site. And the bias was quite impactful. So I was like, well, if I'm feeling like this and I'm running these projects, then how does it feel for someone who's brand new? So that's kind of like the first point that sort of like drew me to think that there was culturally a problem wrong on sites. And then over a period of time, the more that like I became a STEM ambassador, and we had an early talent program with Galloway, we were going into schools and sort of changing that bias a little bit and giving them projects in construction. And I absolutely loved it. And then wanted to do more. So I set up Construction for Women, which is all about early engagement. So we've had 800 girls on a taster day in construction now, showing them what career opportunities are. There's 156 roles in construction. And then the progression from that was then supporting, so sort of like sparking those little first ideas into what does a career look like in construction, and then mentoring, supporting that career pathway. So we grew the mentoring platform out to be the largest mentoring platform in construction. I had a bonkers year last year, won 16 awards in the construction industry. I was just bowled over by the support. But internally, I felt like a Trojan horse. I felt like, yeah, we're shifting the dial. Yes, we're giving women opportunities to thrive. But once on site, I knew that the culture wasn't quite right and that we weren't ready to start flooding the industry with women. Okay. And so then as I delved deeper, it wasn't just the women that were suffering on sites, it was also the men. And we know this. We know that we've got a high suicide rate, we've got high mental health problems. And is that a direct correlation of the fact that we're just a male-dominant work environment and it feels very sort of chest beating or carrot and stick kind of mentality?
Yeah.
And it's affecting everybody, not just the women.
Yeah. Do you think that industry is the way it is because it's just never been forced to develop? You know, it's sort of become what it is organically, if you will, and then it's just carried on and
Absolutely.
carried on.
And for for the men that are working in the industry now, average age is well into their 40s, been in the industry for, some of them 30 years, never really been around women on site. That's the way it's always been. There hasn't been this sort of drive to support the workforce and to bring in more women. 52% of the population are women, and yet we're not inviting them into industry. We've had Brexit. We've lost a lot of workforce. We've got we're coming at the other side of COVID. It's not a career that people look at as a fantastic career choice. But when we've got 3 generations of unemployment, like boys, girls, whoever's coming, out the back of education, they need to realise what a great career this is, what a great career move it is.
They do. And 52% is a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of untapped potential. If you looked at this just as a business model, I'm not trying to box it up, but, and you weren't tapping into 52% of your potential, then that would be considered ludicrous, So I suppose the question to ask, which is a big question, and we're going to dive in on it a little bit more, is what needs to change. You've got a male-dominated industry at the moment, without dispute. There's, there'll be individual perspectives on this, but I certainly, from my perspective, I'll give you that. Probably not educated enough to understand what we need to do differently, because I work in an industry that I've always worked in. It's always been the same. Nothing's changed. So some level of education is required on my part. Alternatively, there may be environments where people have got opinions that go against an increase in women, females in the built environment, and that's a different set of barriers.
I think there's a huge unconscious bias or however you call it, or wrap it up, around, especially in the skilled labour, that there's certain jobs that women can't do. Dry lining, you've got your big boards, and quite a few men have said to me, well, women can't do dry lining, Renee. How can they pick up the boards? And you need big hands, and you need to be, And so I've got my phone out, shown a YouTube clip of a woman dry lining, wearing stilts and putting the boards up on the ceiling. Where there's a will, there's a way. And when we do the taster days, and we're doing sort of like a little bit dry lining or plastering, there's no woman or young lady that can't do that as comparison to, one of the students that's a boy.
You can either do it or you can't, right?
Yeah.
It's the gender of the person shouldn't be the deciding factor. You've either got a skill set that allows you to be able to do that work, or you don't. And if you don't, you do something else. But that's, I think the barrier there is making people aware of that. You'll tell me more in a minute. But also breaking down those social social barriers, I guess, to allow people to think more, this could be a career option for me. And so how do you address that? As the national site standard, you've obviously got multiple aspects to how you're going to deal with this, but and we heard at the launch this morning, there's a huge interaction with the education system and things. What if you were a young person looking for information on how this might open some doors for you in terms of perspective, whatever, what would you inspire people to do?
Well, the National Site Standard is a workforce framework. We've never had this before in construction. We've always audited, processed, and looked at how we deliver projects, and that's what's been audited. And so the National Site Standard is here to audit the workforce and how we support the workforce on sites. But the starting point of that is also the education providers, the training providers. If you think that there's a bias on sites, what about the fact that you've got, colleges that are not actually setting the expectation from day one? Mm-hmm. So the National Site Standard has 2 customers, so to speak. One is your educational side and one is your contract side. And the educational side, they start embedding the National Site Standard from day one. As soon as you've got a T-level bricklaying student rocks up on, at college on their first day, they will be inducted on that site process, and they'll start to embed the National Site Standard. And for students who are unsure about what best practice looks like in that work environment, they're signposted to the National Site Standard now. they've got that confidence and that they'll be able to understand that if it's a national site standard college, university, training provider, if it's a national site standard contractor, it's fluid.
Yeah.
And there's conversation going back and forth. And obviously what we will be doing is we'll be signposting the colleges to the contractors as well. So that great new talent coming through will know that they're supported and we can join at the dots.
I was going to say, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it, really? It breaks down sort of, it forms a formal pathway and maintaining a standard throughout that entire process. So let's go away from education and into the contractor side. Obviously, you're inviting contractors to take this on board. You mentioned earlier that, there's been a split perception, perhaps, and some people are worried about the cost and things. But then when you broke down the costs, they seem menial compared to the
0.1%. There are 5 tiers. Obviously, the first tier starts at a contractor up to 2 million. Mm-hmm. And then we get to contractors that are 250 million plus. And each one of those tiers, it's still 0.1% of their turnover is how much it would cost to be part of the national site standard.
Yeah. So I think let's stop using the word cost and look at the word investment, because if a contractor takes this on board and they abide by the national site standard, what will they have to do differently to what they might be doing now?
So they changed their induction process, which I spoke of before, and setting out the expectations from day one. This isn't just about a more inclusive environment for women. It's a more inclusive environment for everybody on that site and generally. But there are specifics in terms of like the site welfare, site PPE. There's reporting mechanisms. So on the back of every toilet door, there's a QR code. And if you see that the points of the national site standard aren't being adhered to, or there's something off on that site that just doesn't feel like culturally this is how it should be, they can then scan the QR code, raise that objection, concern, whatever it is. It comes through to the national site standard. And as part of that site that's adhering to the standard, we have an appointed personnel. So on every site, there is an NSS appointed personnel.
Okay.
We can then have that open dialogue with them. The personnel on site doesn't feel like they've been whistleblowing because we don't know who that was. But rather than come in with a sledgehammer, we can come in with those soft skills, explain that we know that there is an issue, and then we can start to address it and feed it through and work through with the contractor on how to address that. So it's just a really nice way of being held accountable without that fear of reproach. And we're supporting, obviously, then the leadership skills as well. So we're there to help the new appointed leadership within those sites.
It's really encouraging to hear that people will be able to sort of talk about the concerns on site without having to go the old-fashioned way, if you will, and confront a site manager or a supervisor that may or may not be receptive to those sort of things. But I think for the benefit of those listening now, what sort of issues are you aware of sort of generally that people may not be comfortable with? What are the common factors for women and men, in terms of their ongoing concerns?
I think through the mentoring program that I set up with Construction for Women, this is when I really realised that there was problems that women were quietly enduring and then leaving the industry. So we've got 42% of people leave in the first 5 years, which is kind of huge.
Yeah.
So when we broke it down and the mentors were coming to me, speaking to me about the problems, I mean, some of them, like there was a young QS who was finishing her last year at uni. So the company she was working for had partially paid for that, and part of her contract was that she had to stay for another 2 or 3 years afterwards. But the 5 other QSs that were working alongside her, the firm she was working at, they wouldn't give her the right sort of,
exposure.
Yes, or the projects that she wanted to work on, and she was basically being left to go to a site meeting and take minutes and make the brews, and just generally used as kind of like an administration person, even though she was just as...
And that's not what she was there to do.
And that's not what she was there to do. And she was too young to have that voice. So I suppose in those instances, you know, it's not, when we talk about the site standard, we're talking about the built environment, and across the built environment, you know, you might have a young planner walking on a site for the first time, you know, and you know, you might just be at the stage where you've just got groundworks and whatever, but they're still there. It still matters like how they feel on those sites. And another example is rocking up on site and the toilets being locked.
Sure. The female toilets in particular.
Female toilets. You know, it's happened to me on several occasions. It's happened to most. And, you know, for a young woman to have to go all the way across the site, go and ask for the key, and then have the humiliation of then going all the way back again, opening the toilet door, and invariably it's being used as a cleaning cupboard, isn't helpful, and it feels degrading. I mean, and I've had backlash from that. Like, one of my site managers once said, I don't really know what your problem is. The key's just there. Well, the problem is there should never be a locked toilet, because it's saying that we're not ready for
asking
you.
permission to use the facilities effectively. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that. And I must admit, I've been on multiple sites where they do inevitably get used as a drying room, or they've got the mop in there, or whatever, you know. I think it's or saved for various people, you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like let's leave that for when the client comes and you know, and stuff like that. And it's gone on for years, and you know, and the argument would be, oh well, no one ever really uses that toilet, so we keep it locked.
Yeah.
Well, times are changing. We have lots of T-level students on sites now. So, you know, and what we don't want to do is we don't want to have that feeling where if a locked toilet feels like you're locked out of the site. I mean, other instances, I mean, I've heard from the women that have been mentored is, you know, women sitting in the toilets crying because of some of the inappropriate jokes, banter. You know, you might call it banter. We might see it as bullying, as an intimidation. And you can smile through it and sort of, yeah, but inside and, you know, internally, it makes you feel very uncomfortable. The standard's there to just stamp this out, because it's not just really the women that are feeling, oh, I don't really like this conversation. There are many men there that are like, why are we having this conversation? This isn't appropriate in the workplace.
I think each individual has a threshold on what they consider banter and what they don't. And I would argue the point that the solution to that is one of education. I think not all, but I think many people will say, actually, you know, by saying that makes me feel like this, or, you know, coming from the standard, if you will. And a few people will recognize that and go, so, you know, I never intended that. Of course, there'll be the exception where people do intend it, and that's wrong, and that is bullying, and that needs to be dealt with separately. So with these examples, facilities, you mentioned PPE at the launch this morning. In fact, let's go there. How difficult is it to get a size 4 pair of boots? Because I say that specifically because you mentioned it this morning.
It's impossible. You have to wear two. I mean, like, you know how hot it's been in the last few weeks, and you either wear one pair of socks knowing you're going to get blisters, or 2 pair of socks you've got very hot feet.
Really hot feet.
You know, or on the flip of that, you know, you put a jacket on and you're rolling the sleeves up, which health and safety, it's not great, especially if I'm climbing up scaffolding. It's, you know, it shouldn't be like that way. And we have had new legislation for female PPE. It's not being adhered to. It needs to be adhered to. The NSS will it mandates, and it will be checking and auditing. Are you providing female PPE? And you'll need to show that you're providing it, that you've got a stock of it. It's just, we fundamentally have different body shapes, you know, and
well, yeah. The national site standard isn't just for contractors, is it? We've got developers, we've got end users, etc., so on and so forth. So how do you think that fits across globally?
Thanks. That's a great question, because a lot of people keep saying to me, the national site standard, did we actually need that? Is that not been done before? No, it's not. It's not been done. And if it's left down to the contractor, being a contractor myself, I know that there's some that will jump on this and say, well, we already do this already. We can evidence it, and that's great. And there's a lot that just won't, and they won't change their outlook. And they won't see that a more diverse workforce and a happier workforce will create more productivity. So who do we look at? Well, we look at the client and the end user who want their projects to run smoothly, who want their buildings to be built on time, who want to be able to use that facility at the time that they've set their goals to. And they're our mandators. We've just Greater Manchester Combined Authorities have just mandated in the Good Growth Charter, and Manchester Airport are now mandating for across the board for MAGs, and looking at Stansted as well. We've got Platform Housing Group who are mandating, so they will mandate to the contractor, and so it's down to the developers and it's down to the end users who have got a responsibility. We talk about growth. We talk about what kind of infrastructure we want and how many housings we want. What we need to be focusing down on is how do we treat our workforce? How do we grow our workforce? How do we nurture our workforce to provide all the growth that we're talking about?
Yeah. And I think that's in the best interest. At first, when you hear this, it sounds like a huge challenge to move away from what the current norm is. But actually, staff retention, if you can build in staff retention and this develops a healthy work environment where people want to stay, that will inherently save money for the developer, for the contractor, for whichever asset you look at for this. And I think that's a consideration that needs to be made. How long do you think this will take before you see real, or rather, let me rephrase the question. What would you like to see over the next 12 months now that the standard's been launched?
Oh, well, thanks. So now that we've launched and we've had our big Manchester launch and I've got the support of GMCA, I would like to, by the end of the year, have 20 of our main contractors onboarded and certified. And equally, in each major city, I would like to see support from the local authorities to start to mandate it through frameworks. It's about Fusion 21, Pagabo contacting me and saying, Renee, we've heard about the National Site Standard. Let's start onboarding it. Let's start making sure that we mandate it in the framework.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be, I run Galloway Construction, a small SME. This is my standard because I sat there and cared enough to write it and say, what's wrong with this industry? How do we fix it? But collectively, the National Site Standard is a governance framework. We have got a governance board. We've got a leadership team. They're all prominent people in the construction industry. So I would expect frameworks. I would expect the tier ones, the tier twos. I would expect the end users, the likes of UU and, Transport for Wales or Network Rail, all our end users, all our clients, they should be contacting me and saying, this is a standard that we want to adhere to and we're absolutely going to mandate it. Exactly the same way that Manchester, Airport have thrown their hat in the ring first and said, absolutely, this is what we want to see on our sites.
Which is really, really encouraging, isn't it? But really, it does take for people to read about it, understand it and contact you. We will put your contact information or the contact information for the National Site Standard within the blog underneath the podcast. But for the sake of people listening to this, what is the website? What's the best way to contact you?
It's nationalsitestandard.org.
Nationalsitestandard.org.
Yeah. And so on there, there is a form to contact us to mandate and to then sign up. There's also the pricing. As I mentioned earlier, it's 0.1% of your turnover.
Yeah.
It is a small beer in comparison to, and it's as you said earlier, this isn't a cost to you. You know that as you start to take on the standard, that your workforce welfare will improve, and therefore programs will run on time, will work more cohesively. The bottom line is you'll make more money.
It's not a bad thing, is it?
No.
Make the investment. The standard has been set. So Manchester Airport this morning featured at your launch event. They've thrown their hat in the ring, which is a really encouraging sign. Who else have you been dealing with recently?
Well, I mean, Sister hosted us today. You've seen the project and all the regeneration that's happening there with Bruntwood.
Yeah.
So Bruntwood, straight away we're in there and wanted to support the launch and support the National Site Standard. We've got Phil Mail, who's MD of News. He didn't just speak up today and say, we absolutely are onboarding the National Site Standard. He also said, I'm going to be part of the governance board here and I really want to push this in the right direction. So I'm absolutely thrilled with that. I've been contacted from Mace, contacted from NHS Property Services. Can we have a meeting? We really want to start embedding this within the culture of the NHS. We've had Platform Housing Group, who are absolutely enormous. Who else have we had? I mean, I'm literally every day I'm bowled over. Graham Construction contacted me. I mean, huge tier one contractor. And they were like, we want to do this now. We want to be the first. So it's really nice that there's quite a lot of huge companies that are coming to me that are throwing their hat in the ring immediately. I was asked to deliver a keynote speech for Global Switch, which is the largest data center in Europe. And when I went there to deliver the keynote, they were like, we absolutely want the National Site Standard as a standard across all our sites here at Global Switch. So I was like, wow, okay, this is where it needs to be pushed. It needs to be from your local authorities, from your end user, your clients, your Marks and Spencers, your McDonald's, your Costas. If you think of all the multinationals that you're seeing on a day to day, putting billions into our infrastructure, they're dependent on our workforce.
Absolutely.
It needs to come from them.
We talk about it a lot on here. This is the Build Insights podcast. It's about the built environment we live in. It's not necessarily just for people that are in our industry. It's for people who take an interest in the way that we live our lives in Manchester and around the UK and further afield. And it always surprises me if you come away from the mindset of being in construction, of being in insurance, of being a clerk of works, whatever it is, your discipline is, and you realise what we do on a daily basis builds the environment in which people live their lives. And I think it's so important for people to understand the issues within that industry. And it's really encouraging to hear the calibre of organisations that you've already got interest from. I feel like you're going to get a lot more interest following your launch this morning, following your London launch on Thursday.
Got my London launch on Thursday. And then we're also heading to Birmingham in September for the Conservative Party conference, and then heading to Liverpool for the Labour Party conference. So the agenda there is obviously we're hosting some events and getting that MP perspective as well, and getting the local authorities to see the benefits of once they mandate the National Site Standard, how then they can actually achieve what it is that is their agenda. Okay. We spoke about Andy Burnham's speech and everything within his speech, about the infrastructure, the housing, the education, the support that he's trying to give, T-level students coming through. Everything about the National Site Standard is a tick box, I guess, for everything that's on his agenda. Yeah. You just need to inwardly start looking at the workforce.
Well, a well-timed launch. So following the initial success and the interest from the high-level contractors and frameworks, and I'm sure you're going to get much more of that, I would very much enjoy the opportunity to sit with you in 12 months and see where things have got to. But I'll ask you now to predict the future. Where would you like this to be in 12 months and then maybe in 5 years' time?
It's the National Site Standard. So, we've got GMCA on board, which is fantastic. I want to be mandated across the United Kingdom. Yeah. I want to see the United Kingdom understanding that if we are to grow, we need to support and grow the construction industry. And that means embedding and supporting the National Site Standard. So in 12 months, I want to see some of our biggest city regions coming to me and saying, you're absolutely right. Let's get you mandated. We've got the Good Growth Charter here. We've had the Good Growth Fund. There's a lot of money that's gone out to a lot of our local authorities. They need to put their money where their mouth is, and they need to say, if you want to tap into this resource, then you need to obviously mandate the National Site Standard. So that is the first point. And obviously for the whole of the growth of the country, like I say, it's our end users, it's our clients. They need to be looking and saying, we need to support the national site standard. And it will then filter down to the contractors.
You've explained to me what the national site standard seeks to achieve, but what makes this so important for you?
It's for the workforce. It's for the people that I work with on a day-to-day. You know, I've always said that we don't just build buildings, we build communities. And construction's broken. It is. You know, when you look at our mental health problems, when you look at the suicide rate, when you look at how many people we lose, I mean, even our apprenticeship success rate's only 30%. I mean, so it is broken. And yet I love construction. So I might sit here saying and pointing out everything that's wrong. But the sense of pride that I get when I take my kids down Blackpool seafront and say, hey kids, mummy and daddy built that building. And you see that park that you've just played on, we built that as well. You know, and it feels like we've achieved something, like we've given something to the community. And we're not looking after the very people that do that. So my success and what I would love to see is walking on a building site that doesn't have that clipped feeling of there's an edge to it. Nobody wants to work in a work environment like that. People want to work in a place where they want to go to work and they want to enjoy that work. And that's what we need to focus in on. And I want to start marketing the industry for all the joy that you can get and have an environment where it doesn't thrive on that banter, but it thrives on that camaraderie and that balanced workforce that makes it a special place to be. And I think when you put that magic into a building, that's why I believe it's incredibly important.
Well, I agree. And I'm very much looking forward to speaking to you again on this. I can't wait to watch this grow and develop, and we can discuss, you know, success points and areas that develop in the future if you're willing to come back. And I'd love to have you here.
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to come back.
Well, thanks so much for your time today. We will, as I said earlier, put all the links to the National Site Standard within the podcast. And if anyone wants to contact you, they can do it via there, or they can find your website. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks very much, Ben. Thanks.